I picked the corner table myself, the one tucked behind the exposed brick pillar at the back of the cafe on Queen Street West, where the espresso machine drowned out every conversation around me. I'd been sitting there for 11 minutes before he walked in, and I used every one of those minutes to talk myself out of leaving. He spotted me immediately. That was the thing about my husband's affair partner's husband. He had the kind of stillness that made you feel seen before you were ready. He sat down across from me, didn't take off his coat, and placed a manila envelope on the table between us like he was laying down a hand of cards. "I think we both know what's in here," he said. I did know, I just hadn't expected him to be the one holding it. 3 months earlier, I'd come home early from a site visit in Mississauga to find my husband's car in the driveway at 2 in the afternoon on a Wednesday. He'd told me he had back-to-back client meetings until 6. I remember standing on our front porch in Leslieville, key in hand, noticing that the living room blinds were drawn in a way I'd never drawn them. I almost convinced myself it was nothing. I went around to the side door. The kitchen was spotless. His laptop bag was on the counter. I heard his voice upstairs, low and unhurried, the way he only ever talked when he thought no one was listening. I didn't go up. I sat down at the kitchen table and waited. He came downstairs 20 minutes later alone, and the look on his face when he saw me, that half second of sheer panic before he rearranged it into something casual, told me everything. "You're home early," he said. "So are you," I said. We had dinner that night like nothing had happened. I passed him the salad. He asked about my project in Scarborough. I answered. My hands were perfectly steady and I have no idea how. That night, after he fell asleep, I went through his phone. Her name was saved under a colleague's name, someone he'd mentioned to me before, someone I'd never thought twice about. The messages went back 14 months. 14 months. Our daughter had just turned 2 when it started. I'd been back at work 6 weeks after maternity leave, exhausted and still not fully myself, and he had been, what? Bored? Feeling neglected? I read every message, everyone, and I kept waiting to feel something sharp and clean like rage. What I felt instead was this slow, terrible sinking, like watching the floor give way one board at a time. I put his phone back exactly where I'd found it. I didn't say anything for 2 weeks. I used those 2 weeks to call my sister in Vancouver, who's a paralegal. I used them to open a personal checking account at a different bank. I used them to photograph every financial document in the house, mortgage statements, investment account summaries, his business incorporation papers, the joint TFSA we'd been building for 7 years. And I used them to find out who she was. She was a real estate agent, mid-30s, worked out of an office in Etobicoke. Her photo on the agency website was professional and polished. She had a husband, too. I found that in about 4 minutes on LinkedIn. He was in commercial lending. They had a house in the West End. They looked, from the outside, exactly like us. I didn't contact her. I didn't contact him either. I confronted my husband on a Saturday morning while our daughter was at my mother-in-law's. I'd made coffee. I set 2 mugs on the table. I sat down and I said, "I know about her. I've known for 2 weeks. I need you to tell me the truth about the finances." He went through the full sequence: denial, then partial admission, then the specific kind of crumbling that happens when someone realizes the person across from them already has the receipts. He cried. I didn't. What came out, over 3 hours that felt like 30, was this: he had been running a side consulting arrangement through a numbered company he'd set up without telling me. Money was flowing in and out of an account I didn't know existed. He said it was above board. He said he was going to tell me. He said a lot of things. I called my sister that afternoon. "Get a lawyer before he does," she said. "Tomorrow morning." I had an appointment booked by 4 o'clock. The separation process in Ontario is its own kind of slow-motion disaster. There are forms and timelines and financial disclosure requirements and mandatory waiting periods. My lawyer, a woman in her 50s who wore reading glasses on a chain and had clearly seen everything, told me the numbered company was going to be the central issue. If he's been generating family income through that account and keeping it off the books, that affects the equalization calculation, she said. He says it was legitimate, I told her. She looked at me over her glasses. They always do. We filed. He hired his own lawyer. The process began its grinding forward motion. I moved into the spare room. We were civil in front of our daughter, who was 3 by then and had started asking why Daddy slept in a different room. And I told her it was because Daddy snored, and she accepted this completely and went back to her coloring book. I was managing. Barely, but managing. My firm had given me a senior associate role 8 months earlier, and the work was the one part of my life that still made sense. I poured myself into it. I was billing 60-hour weeks. My mother-in-law, who had figured out what was happening and was quietly furious with her son in the dignified, devastating way of certain women of her generation, started taking our daughter 2 afternoons a week without being asked. I don't know what I would have done without her. And then, on a Tuesday afternoon in February, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. "My name is Lorne," the voice said. "I think you know who I am." I did. He was her husband. I almost hung up. My first instinct was that this was some kind of trap, that she'd put him up to it, that it was a manipulation, that I was about to be drawn into something that would compromise my position in the proceedings. I'd watched enough true crime to be suspicious of unsolicited phone calls from strangers with convenient timing, but something in his voice stopped me. It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't rehearsed. It had the specific, exhausted quality of someone who had also been sitting with something unbearable for a long time. "I'm not calling to cause problems for you," he said. "I'm calling because I found something, and I think it affects both of us." We met the following Thursday at that cafe on Queen Street. He was taller than I'd expected. He ordered a black coffee and didn't touch it. He slid the envelope across the table and told me to open it. Inside were financial records, bank transfers, correspondence between my husband and a numbered company, not the one I already knew about, a different one, registered in a different province. And among the documents, there it was, her name, as a director. My husband and his affair partner had been operating a joint business venture for almost 2 years, a property management scheme structured to look like separate entities. They had been siphoning funds, reinvesting them, and routing the profits through accounts neither of their spouses had any knowledge of. "I have a forensic accountant," Lorne said quietly. "I've had one for 3 months. I wasn't sure what I was looking at until recently." I looked up from the papers. "How much?" He told me. I set the documents down carefully. Outside, a streetcar rolled past and the windows rattled slightly in the February cold. I thought about my daughter asking why Daddy snored. "Why are you bringing this to me?" I asked. "Because my lawyer told me I need a complainant for the civil claim to hold," he said. "And because—" He stopped, pressed his hand flat on the table. "Because I've been sitting on this alone for 3 months and I am very, very tired." I understood that. I called my lawyer from the parking lot. "Don't sign anything," she said, when I'd finished explaining. "Don't agree to anything. Bring me everything he gave you, and I want his forensic accountant's contact information." "Is this good for us?" I asked. A pause. "If it's what it looks like? Yes, this changes everything." It took another 6 weeks to verify the documents, to confirm the scope of the scheme, and to build the picture that would become the foundation of 2 simultaneous legal actions, my equalization claim and a civil fraud suit that Lorne and I were pursuing jointly. During that time, I met with Lorne twice more. The first time was at his lawyer's office in the financial district, a glass tower boardroom where I sat across from him and 2 lawyers and a forensic accountant and answered questions for 2 hours. The second time was at a coffee shop near my office, just the 2 of us, because his lawyer needed a clarification and mine was unavailable and we were both tired of formal settings. He was from Calgary originally. He'd moved to Toronto for work 12 years ago. He had a dog, a retriever, who'd needed knee surgery the previous fall and had cost him an amount of money he described with the resigned, slightly baffled expression of a person who would have paid it 10 times over. He asked about my daughter. I told him about the snoring explanation and he laughed, a real laugh, the surprised kind, and I realized it was the first time I'd made anyone laugh in months. I want to be clear about what I am saying and what I am not saying. The road from that cafe to anything resembling a beginning was long and not at all straight. There was the better part of a year between that first meeting and the point where either of us was in any condition to think about anything other than surviving what we were each in the middle of. I want to be honest about that, because the easy version, the version where two wronged people find each other and it's romantic and simple, is not what happened. What happened was harder and slower and more complicated and also, eventually, more worth it than I knew how to imagine in the middle of it. The civil case settled out of court 14 months after Lauren first called me. My husband's numbered companies, both of them, were ordered to be fully disclosed in the equalization proceedings, and the adjusted net family property calculation looked very different once the hidden assets were included. My lawyer, who by this point I genuinely considered a kind of wartime ally, called me the morning the settlement was finalized. "You should take your daughter somewhere nice this weekend," she said. I took her to the Ontario Science Centre. She was obsessed with the water table exhibit, and I stood there for 45 minutes watching her redirect little wooden boats through channels she'd designed herself, and something in my chest that had been clenched since that Saturday morning in the kitchen finally, slowly, began to release. My ex-husband received a conditional discharge related to a financial reporting complaint filed with the Ontario Securities Commission. His affair partner faced a separate civil judgment. Neither of them went to prison. I want to be accurate about that, but the professional and financial consequences were, by all accounts, substantial. He sold the Leslieville house as part of the settlement. I used my portion of the proceeds as the down payment on a semi-detached in East York, 3 blocks from a good school and a 12-minute walk from a park my daughter now considers personally hers. Her name for the park is the Acorn Park because of a specific oak tree near the north entrance that she has claimed. I find this to be among the best things I know about her. Lauren finalized his own divorce 8 months before mine was complete. We stayed in touch through all of it. Texts about court dates, the occasional coffee when our schedules aligned, the practical, unglamorous correspondence of two people working through the same system from different directions. His retriever finished her rehabilitation and graduated to a full park walk. He sent me a photo, the dog mid-stride, looking deeply pleased with herself. I saved it. The first time we had dinner that wasn't about legal strategy was in November, at a small place on Dundas West that a colleague of mine had recommended. We talked for 3 hours and didn't mention either of our ex-spouses once. On the walk back to the parking garage, he told me he'd been thinking about buying a place. Still renting, didn't love it. The market was genuinely terrible, but East York's not bad, I said. He looked sideways at me. I've heard that. I'm writing this from the kitchen of that semi-detached in East York. My daughter is at school. Her rubber boots, the ones printed with little foxes, are by the front door. Lauren's coat is on the hook beside them. I won't pretend that getting here was anything other than one of the hardest things I've lived through. I won't pretend the anger doesn't still surface sometimes, or that the grief, for the life I thought I had, for the years I spent building something with someone who is building something else behind my back, is fully resolved. It isn't. I don't know if it ever completely will be. But I think about that February afternoon on Queen Street, and the envelope on the table and a man I'd never met saying I'm very, very tired in a voice that I completely understood. And I think about my daughter at the water table, redirecting her boats through channels of her own design. Some things you don't plan. Some things arrive through the side door on the Tuesday when you least expect them, and they change everything, not all at once, and not without cost, but completely and for good. I keep coming back to the moment I sat at that kitchen table, key still in my hand, and chose to wait instead of react. It didn't feel like a decision at the time. It felt like my legs simply wouldn't carry me upstairs. But looking back, I think it was the first honest thing I did, choosing to know the full truth before I said a single word. There's something I've come to understand about the way things unfold when people make choices driven purely by self-interest. It rarely stays contained. My husband didn't just betray me in the obvious way. He built an entire parallel architecture of deception, shell companies, and misdirected income, and a business venture run with the same woman he was sleeping with. And for a while, it all held together because no one was looking closely enough. But structures built on that kind of dishonesty have a weight limit. Eventually, they buckle. Not because the universe is keeping score in any mystical sense, but because concealment requires constant maintenance, and the more layers you add, the more points of failure you create. He wasn't unlucky. He made choices that had predictable consequences, and the consequences arrived. What I'm more interested in now is what got me through it, not the legal strategy, though that mattered enormously, but the internal part. The part where I had to decide over and over to keep thinking clearly when everything in me wanted to just burn it all down. I made a lot of quiet decisions in those first 2 weeks. Opening the bank account, calling my sister, photographing documents at 2 in the morning with my phone screen dimmed so the light wouldn't show under the bedroom door. None of it felt brave at the time. It felt like the only alternative to drowning. But I think that's actually what steadiness looks like from the inside. Not calm, not confidence, just the refusal to stop moving forward even when you can't see the ground. Lorne taught me something too, without meaning to. He called me a stranger, the wife of the woman who had blown up his marriage, because he'd been carrying something too heavy to carry alone, and because he'd thought carefully enough about the situation to realize that what he was holding was mine to know about too. That took a particular kind of integrity. The easier thing would have been to use the information only for himself, to protect only his own outcome. He didn't do that, and because he didn't, both of us ended up with something more solid than either of us could have built separately. I think about my daughter redirecting her wooden boats at the science center. The way she'd study a blocked channel for a moment, then adjust, not frustrated, just focused, already working on the next configuration. She's 4. She doesn't know she's teaching me anything. But I watch her and I think, that's it actually. That's the whole thing. You look at what's in front of you honestly, you think it through, and then you keep going. The house in East York is quieter than the one I left. That used to feel like a loss. It doesn't anymore.